Welcome to another deep dive. We're going to be talking about the Japanese Grand Prix today. There's a lot to unpack. You guys have sent in some really interesting stuff, especially from the F1 Blog's YouTube channel. We're going to be looking at Verstappen's performance, Red Bull's kind of surprising turnaround, and what happened with Tsunoda in his first race with the team. We'll also touch on McLaren.
Yeah. It was a pretty traumatic Grand Prix, wasn't it? Lots of twists and turns, and those F1 Blogs videos really gave a good behind-the-scenes look at everything that went down. Should be a good one to analyze.
Okay. Let's start with Verstappen in qualifying. The F1 blog stuff made a big deal about how unexpected his pole position was. McLaren basically owned every practice session at Suzuka. Everyone thought they were going to lock out the front row. But then, boom, Verstappen snatches pole from Norris by 12 thousandths of a second? Crazy close.
Yeah, I mean, if you just looked at Friday's times, you'd have bet the house on McLaren. Listen, for Verstappen to pull out that extra little bit right when it mattered, well, it says a lot about him as a driver, doesn't it? And about Red Bull's ability to adapt. It's amazing how some drivers can just find another level when the pressure is on.
And the reactions to that lap, apparently Fernando Alonso was watching the last sector on a monitor, and he was just speechless. Later on, he even said Verstappen was outstanding and called him a reference for all of us. Even Verstappen's own race engineer called the lap insane. Pretty high praise.
It really shows how much respect Verstappen has earned within F1, right? For a guy like Alonso, a two-time world champion, to be so impressed, it shows you how special that lap was. It wasn't just about speed. It was about beating McLaren when they looked unbeatable.
And you know what makes Verstappen's pole even crazier? The F1 Blog's videos showed how much he was struggling on Friday. Apparently, he was really unhappy with the car, saying it was flexing and that the front end was all over the place. So for them to turn it around so completely between Friday and Saturday, that's pretty impressive.
It is, isn't it? To go from a car that the reigning world champion is clearly uncomfortable with to pole position in less than 24 hours? Red Bull is a seriously well-oiled machine. They can analyze data, figure out the problems, and fix them so quickly. Makes you wonder what kind of tech they're using back at the factory.
So how did they do it? The F1 Blog's analysis was pretty detailed about Red Bull's overnight transformation. It sounds like a combination of things, like their ability to crunch data at the factory, but also some pretty significant setup changes they made to the car. They adjusted the weight distribution, the balance, the roll bars, the springs, and get this, they lowered the wing level.
Right, and those changes are not just simple tweaks. Adjusting the weight distribution, for example, that can completely change how the car handles in the corners and under braking. And messing with the roll bars and springs, that affects how the weight shifts during turns and how the car handles bumps. It's incredible how Red Bull can make all these adjustments, these tiny little changes, and end up with a completely different car on track.
Yeah, and that wing level thing is particularly interesting. The F1 Blogs people were saying that's not something you usually do, especially when there's a chance of rain. Lowering the wing means less downforce, which can make the car harder to control in the corners and could even wear out the tires faster. But it also means more speed on the straights. So was this a strategic decision? Were they prioritizing qualifying, or did they have some kind of race plan in mind?
Good question. It was a risky move, for sure. Less downforce in qualifying can help with top speed, but it can also make things tricky in the corners, and yeah, you might end up chewing through your tires. Maybe Red Bull's data showed that the straight-line speed advantage would outweigh those risks. Or maybe they just wanted that pole position and figured they'd adapt their strategy later. It's hard to say for sure.
Besides the actual car setup, the F1 Blog's analysis also focused on Verstappen's role, particularly his tire management. Apparently, a lot of drivers were struggling to get their tires up to temperature, especially George Russell, but Verstappen and Red Bull seem to have it all figured out. It's a reminder that having a fast car isn't enough. You need a driver who can actually get the most out of the tires.
Oh, absolutely. Tire management is crucial in F1 these days. Getting the tires in the right temperature window at the right time for qualifying, that's where you get that extra grip. The fact that Verstappen can do this consistently, even when others are struggling, it speaks volumes about his talent and his feel for the car. It's that combination of Red Bull's engineering and Verstappen's driving that makes him so tough to beat.
Let's move on to Tsunoda. It was his first race with Red Bull, and, well, the F1 Blog's videos kind of painted a picture of a weekend that started with a lot of hype but ended in disappointment. He qualified 15th and finished the race 12th. Not great.
Still is a big step up going to a top team like Red Bull's, especially in your home race, right? All that pressure, all those expectations. The F1 Blog's people were right to point out that even though he showed some speed, actually delivering consistently, especially in qualifying, is a whole other ballgame.
They talked a lot about the Red Bull car having a narrow operating window, and that was a big problem for both Tsunoda and Lawson before him. Basically, it means the car only performs at its best within a very specific range of setup and tire conditions. If you're outside that window, it's really hard to drive fast.
Think of it like a musical instrument, right? When it's perfectly tuned, it sounds amazing. But even a slight change in temperature or humidity can throw it off. The F1 blog's analysis made it seem like the Red Bull car is kind of like that. When it's in the zone, it's insanely fast, like we see with Verstappen. But for a driver who's still getting used to it, like Tsunoda, it's really hard to find that sweet spot and stay in it. You need perfect setup and perfect driving.
They went into a lot of detail about Tsunoda's Q2 lap, how it all started to go wrong early on. He had a wobble, ran a bit wide, and that messed up his whole lap. He didn't make it to Q3. It just shows how sensitive that Red Bull car is. A small mistake that wouldn't be a big deal in another car can cost you a lot of time when you're driving on the edge like that, especially in qualifying where the margins are so tiny.
Oh yeah, in qualifying, you're talking about hundredths of a second, even thousands. If the car has a narrow operating window, any little slip-up, a tiny mistake with the brakes or the throttle, can take you out of that sweet spot and cost you a ton of time. It's a balancing act, pushing to the limit, but also staying within the car's limits.
Interestingly, Tsunoda decided to run a bigger rear wing than Verstappen. Apparently, he was worried about the rain and thought it would give him more stability, but after the race, he said he should have gone with a smaller wing. He felt like the bigger wing slowed him down on the straights and made it harder to overtake. It sounds like he's still figuring out what works best with the Red Bull.
It's all part of the learning curve, right? F1 isn't just about driving fast. It's about understanding the car, the tires, the track, the weather conditions, all of it. For Tsunoda to admit that he made the wrong call with the wing, that shows he's willing to learn and adapt. That's important.
Yeah, even though the results weren't great, the F1 blog's analysis said Tsunoda was still feeling positive about his performance. He said he learned a lot about tire management and wing setup. And his team principal was also pretty encouraging. He said Tsunoda was fitting in well, but they also made it clear that they expect a lot more from him in the future.
Right. That's the thing about being in a top team. You get a chance to prove yourself, but the pressure to perform is huge. Tsunoda has potential, but he needs to turn that potential into results. Consistent qualifying, good race finishes, that's what they'll be looking for.
Before we wrap up, let's touch on McLaren. They were the fastest in practice, but they didn't get pole. The F1 blog's analysis suggested that maybe Norris and Piastri both left a little bit on the table in qualifying. They also talked about Norris having some issues with the car's braking and throttle response, something McLaren's working on. Their team boss even said they'll be bringing updates to the next few races to address that. The analysis concluded that if you could combine the best parts of both McLaren drivers' laps, they probably would have been on pole. It could have been a much closer fight.
It's interesting, isn't it? Even when you have a fast car, putting together the perfect qualifying lap is still so difficult. Those tiny margins make all the difference. And Norris's issues with the car, that just shows how much fine-tuning goes on in F1. Every little detail matters.
A quick welcome to all the new viewers who have joined us on the F1 Blog's YouTube channel. We're going deep into the Japanese Grand Prix, giving you the kind of analysis you won't find anywhere else.
Glad to have you all here. We're having a great time breaking down all the action from this amazing race.
So for everyone listening, what can we take away from all of this? This deep dive into the Japanese Grand Prix really highlights the fine margins that make F1 so exciting. We saw Verstappen's incredible skill and Red Bull's technical mastery on full display. They overcame a difficult start and turned it into a dominant qualifying performance. Then you have Tsunoda, who's still finding his feet in a top team, learning what it takes to drive a car with such a specific operating window, and McLaren's near miss just shows that the competition is closer than ever this season. It's going to be a good one.
If you want to understand what makes F1 so compelling, this race had it all, really. It's about technology, skills, strategy, and that constant battle to find any advantage, no matter how small.
The strategic calls, the driver feedback, the little tweaks they make to the car, it all matters. The fact that fractions of a second can make such a big difference is what makes this sport so amazing.
It makes you think, doesn't it? We saw Verstappen dominate, and we saw Tsunoda struggle all in the same car. So how much of it is the driver, and how much of it is the team and the car? It's a question worth considering.
And that brings us to the end of our deep dive into the Japanese Grand Prix. If you liked what you heard, please subscribe to the F1 Blogs channel for more exclusive F1 content and analysis. We're here to bring you closer to the sport with the insights and information you won't find anywhere else. Thanks for listening.